Unlike Doctor Who, Torchwood is a series with a much more grounded setting and bigger recurring cast. This allows for a completely new dynamic compared to Doctor Who, but one of the pitfalls of a show like this is the inability to develop every character sufficiently. However, instead of falling into this pitfall, Torchwood thrives by dedicating entire episodes to exploring specific characters within the team. These kinds of episodes had been prominent in the first half of Series 1, but by episode 7 there was still one character largely undeveloped, that being Toshiko Sato. By this point in the series there had been episodes like Cyberwoman to explore Yanto and Ghost Machine to explore Owen, but Tosh had mostly faded into the background. However, this would all change with Toby Whithouse's episode Greeks Bearing Gifts, which is an exceptional character piece entirely centred around Tosh. Episodes like this are a smart direction for the show to take, since it allows the audience to get a much better idea of who Tosh is, and what her character motivations are. So how does this episode flesh this character out, and what has it got to do with a pendant that can read people's minds? The main thing about Greeks Bearing Gifts is actually the character explorations it carries out. It is crucial for both the characterisation of Tosh and the expanding upon the affair between Gwen and Owen, which began during Countryside the episode before. This affair exploration is one of the first things that happens in this episode, as Owen flirts with Gwen and alludes to their encounter at the end of that episode, even though Tosh is right there in the tent with them. Obviously, I had the hindsight of knowing Tosh always had feelings for Owen, but between Countryside and Greeks Bearing Gifts, I think this plot point is set up very well, and adds a new layer to this affair storyline because Tosh has to look on from the outside. This external perspective with a reason to feel slighted by this ongoing affair. It sets up tension between the trio, especially because Owen and Gwen break her computer by messing around with each other at the hub. Tosh rightfully calls them out on this because this is their workplace and they're meant to be working, but Owen just dismissively insults her for daring to do her job. I think this setup means it makes a lot of sense that Tosh would be concerned about how the team view her. She works very hard, and remarks like this show the viewers that she's very self-conscious about it. So the fact she gets given a pendant that can read thoughts means she has a genuine reason to care about what her teammates think about her when she's not around. It makes her the perfect vessel for the episode, the perfect target for Mary, because she's in such a vulnerable position emotionally, and her fears can be easily preyed upon to manipulate her.
They pity you. They exclude you. They've got you doing bloody admin.
I think this insecurity is the exact reason Mary approaches Tosh to seduce her and become her worm tongue. It wouldn't work on any of the other members of Torchwood since they have their guard up or just wouldn't care about what Mary would be saying to them at the bar. So that just leaves Tosh, the lonely, insecure member of the team, obsessed with tinkering away at alien tech and finding out about alien culture. It's the perfect rationalization for why Mary targets her, because she would know that Tosh is the easiest to go after in order to get her ship back. Any of the other members would have just left after Mary started reading off their entire background and biography, but Tosh is in an especially vulnerable state, so I think it makes a lot of sense. She even says she should leave, but she's too curious for her own good, which is exactly what Mary knew because Mary knows everything about her, so Tosh falls right into the trap, as expected. It leads to Tosh immediately spinning loads of information about herself and Torchwood, which I think is kind of similar to how Gwen needs Owen. Even though Gwen has Reese, she couldn't share this aspect of her life with him. She has to hide it away like some kind of dirty, shameful secret. There was no way for her to get an emotional release after all her traumatic and life-altering experiences, but she was able to find that in Owen because he goes through the same things. However, Tosh has been pushed to the outskirts of the team and doesn't have much of a personal connection with her co-workers, so there's no way for her to find that similar release because Owen belittles her and brushes her off constantly. However, Mary claims to be part of a scavenger group who follow Torchwood and collect their own alien tech. It's good for the world of the show, showing it's not just Torchwood following this alien activity. Episodes of Doctor Who showed us that this is a world full of conspiracy theorists that know the truth of aliens and the adventures of the show, so this continues that idea, having these groups who follow in the footsteps of Torchwood because they leave a pretty big footprint with everything they do. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed them. Mary being this kind of character allows her to become that person Tosh can confide in, because she has those similarities to Tosh. I just think it's a smart piece of characterization to draw those two people close together. Because Tosh feels like she can open up to Mary, she gives this great monologue about what she and Torchwood find regularly, how it's usually all weapons and war, but every now and then they'll find something beautiful, like an alien letter written from a father to his children. I think it's a good way for her to justify what she does, adding an optimistic, human slot to this very analytical character. She sees something truly special in the work they do, since it shows her this window into how similar humans are to every other race, how so many things are constant throughout the universe regardless of race, religion and creed. It's good for combining that scientific, cultural mind with the rest of the show. In Everything Changes, we saw her using alien technology to scan a book onto her laptop, so it set up the idea of her being obsessed with alien culture and the parallels with human culture. It sets her apart from the rest of the team, because she sees everything differently to her co-workers. It again shows why Mary targets her, because Tosh is that desperate for someone who shares her worldview. She's such an easy and willing target. I think you can see it reflected in Mary's eyes this entire scene. It's almost that entrancing stare of knowing she has her prey exactly where she wants her. Everything is going exactly according to plan, and her look reflects this. It's interesting that she doesn't say a word for the entirety of Tosh's monologue. It's just her allowing Tosh to talk and talk, giving away so much information. Then, as soon as Tosh realizes she's talking too much, Mary strikes again to reaffirm her position of influence and power. She appeals to Tosh's curiosity by showing her an alien artifact. It's essentially the equivalent of being a con artist and reeling your mark in with what they want, since Tosh would never be able to resist such technology. It's also clever that Mary almost makes Tosh dependent on her. She gets Tosh to hone into her thoughts, further tightening her grip, and closing the trap by planting the idea that Mary is a point of safety, someone Tosh can trust because focusing on her drowns everyone else in her life out. It's great for establishing the link between these two and showing how desperate Tosh is for that person to trust.
And there's no one to talk to about this.
Tosh goes into work the next day, having told Mary she'll show the rest of the team the pendant, even though Mary knows she won't. And Mary is completely right, since Tosh immediately hides it from Yanto, and then puts it on to hear the thoughts of everyone else in the team. This sequence is great because it further enforces the sense of isolation for Tosh. She now knows what Gwen and Owen think of her, how Owen thinks she's weird and boring, and how Gwen judges her fashion choices. This doesn't make them bad people, because everyone has thoughts like these about everyone in their life, no matter how close they are. But the important thing is that Tosh can now actually hear these thoughts, so it pushes her down this path into Mary's arms, showing her she's right to talk to Mary because she feels like the rest of the team don't like her at all. It's simple confirmation bias, Tosh only hearing these negative thoughts, so seemingly proving herself right to not be close with the rest of the team. I like that she has a very strong reaction to the pendant, not just accepting it and not seeing positivity in it at first. It ruined her working life and she's right to feel upset about that, because she wasn't prepared for such a shake-up in her worldview. But once again, Mary puts herself in this position of trust and protectiveness, weaseling her way into being the only one Tosh can confide in now that the Torchwood team have lost her trust. Mary is essentially dividing and conquering, splitting Tosh away from the others to make her easier to manipulate. Mary has the answers. She has an influence on Tosh now, since she makes it seem like she has no agenda and no negativity towards Tosh, even though she is clearly using her to get into Torchwood. I just think the episode does a good job of explaining how Mary worms her way into Tosh's life and seduces her so effectively, because she takes everything away from her and presents herself as the only person Tosh can actually trust and rely on. After they have sex, Mary uses Tosh's feelings for Owen as a way to goad and influence her in order to prey upon her insecurities and put her in a more vulnerable state. It's thanks to Mary that Tosh knows how Owen truly feels, but it's also Mary who is the only one Tosh can confide in. It further shows that Tosh has feelings for him, so you once again get a good understanding of why his thoughts about her made her feel so hurt and insecure. It's these moments of insecurity that make Tosh so vulnerable to Mary whispering poison in her ear, so I think it's Mary continuing to manipulate her so well, because she puts Tosh into these positions where she can influence her, puppeting her through the guise of this alien pendant.
See, I told you. Isn't it incredible? Some of the stuff you hear.
I really like the pendant and how its effects are explored throughout the episode. In the bar, Tosh puts it on and is completely overwhelmed by the sudden flood of thoughts from everyone around her. This moment is directed and edited so well because it does a good job communicating the absolute whiplash Tosh experiences, suddenly hearing all this constant noise and mental traffic, showing how invasive and dangerous this technology is. This is something that allows you to glimpse into anyone's minds, discovering their secrets and darkest thoughts without them knowing. It's a terrifying concept, this complete loss of privacy. The pendant itself isn't the main focus, which is a smart move, because Toby Whithouse instead uses the technology and the concepts to explore the characters themselves, making this pendant a vessel rather than the central focus. It gives Tosh a direct window into Gwen and Owen's affair, overhearing their thoughts and memories of their recent sexual encounters. It's very voyeuristic, and you know it's wrong to hear these thoughts, because they're very private, no matter the morality of them. Regardless of her personal feelings towards Owen, Tosh shouldn't be hearing this stuff, but it also shows how this affair is developing, since we find out that Gwen and Owen had sex in his car this morning, so it's happened a second time. It's not just that encounter at the end of Countryside. It's just a smart way of weaving this plot into the pendant concept, using them to benefit each other, because it gives us that perverse look into the depths of this dark secret, showing just how invasive and dangerous this artifact is. Lastly, Tosh also hears Yanto's thoughts, and I think this is a very interesting moment. He doesn't have any thoughts about her, he's wrapped up in his own thoughts and his own identity and sense of self. It continues to show the aftermath of Cyberwoman, telling us that he's still feeling that intense pain and hurt because of what happened to Lisa in that episode. I just like when stories show consequences of other stories, showing that the characters don't just get over things like the trauma they faced during those episodes. There's a very good glimpse of how the pendant can actually be used for good, balancing the effects of this power and showing it can't be all bad, as Tosh hears the thoughts of a man planning on killing his family. It's a smart story beat to touch upon because it does establish that idea of it actually being a good thing. There's a real moral dilemma with a power like this. It's not black and white, so you understand how Tosh was so easily manipulated, because as Countryside established, she's determined to save lives and do the right thing. The pendant appeals to this side of her and her good intentions, so it's exactly the kind of thing she's looking for. The man trying to kill his ex-wife and son is good real-world horror that shows how the sci-fi elements of Torchwood can stop these kinds of real scenarios. I think it's very similar to the Gauntlet in Everything Changes. In that episode, the Gauntlet could bring people back to life, so it poised a great possibility, the power to stop death itself. However, Susie became obsessed with this power and started to kill to use it, to experiment on it. It shows how this kind of alien technology is very nuanced, how it can be incredibly beneficial, but it's too dangerous for us because we can't control it. Tosh stopping a murder shows how this ability is too powerful for a species like ours. Even though she saved people's lives, was she right to because she knew the crime before it could happen? Maybe they should make a movie about that concept or something. Because Tosh stopped a murder, it's not surprising that Captain Jack would find out about it. There's a good moment as he confronts her about it because he knows there's something off, as her story makes no sense whatsoever. Captain Jack is a character who is very good at keeping his cards close to his chest, so he is very subtle here as he probes Tosh for information, trying to see how she reacts because he knows this is out of character for her. These are his team members and he knows exactly who they are, so when Tosh starts suddenly stopping murders and doing pub quizzes, he's right to be skeptical of her. However, I do feel like I have to address Jack's reasoning about why he's skeptical of friends acting strange. He tells a story about how he had a friend who turned out to be transgender and began identifying as a woman called Vanessa. It's a very strange piece of dialogue and a lot of people have taken it to mean writer Toby Whithouse is transphobic. Personally, I don't think so, but this line is definitely yikes and probably shouldn't have been involved in the episode, since it makes it out to seem like people should be paranoid of transgender people, which is, well, pretty yikes. But this isn't really something I feel qualified or informed enough to talk about. I just thought I should probably mention it because it has become a very focal point of discussion around the episode. I like that Jack was skeptical of Tosh, but I just don't think this justification is necessary or good. So it does detract from the episode and suck you out of your immersion for a bit, because it makes you wonder why. It was already obvious that Jack knew she was acting out of character, so they probably should have just left it at that.
It came up in a pub quiz.
You went to a pub quiz?
Yeah. No, I love pub quizzes.
Throughout the episode, Mary acts as this influential, serpentine character, dictating a lot of Tosh's actions and manipulating her worldview. However, there's a great moment where she isn't in control for once, and Tosh actually goes against her plans, deciding to take the pendant to Torchwood. It forces Mary to put her foot down because she can't let herself be captured by them. I think this is important because it shows that Tosh isn't completely influenced by Mary. She still has some control in this relationship. She's not an overly naive and easily manipulated character. It also means that Mary has to reveal her alien form, which is a very good visual, looking so suitably alien and ethereal. being very well realised. Because Mary has had to reveal her true form, she also has to reveal her intentions as well. You can suddenly tell she has a much darker edge now, with the way she talks about her home planet. She sounds so bitter and sinister, cluing you into the idea that she might be up to no good. However, Tosh is unaware of this because she has been influenced so heavily by Mary. The whole time Mary has been driving a wedge between Tosh and Torchwood, sowing seeds of distrust and convincing her she's what's best for Tosh, not Torchwood. Mary knows that the others won't be swayed by her tricks, so she has to play on this dissension, once again using that insecurity of Tosh, but this time upping it to the extent that Tosh believes Torchwood is evil. This constant poison from Mary culminates in that fantastic shot of Tosh laying despondent and broken on the bed, Mary sitting in the corner and smoking, looking so sinister. Tosh has been completely worn down and destroyed by what Mary has been feeding her and whispering into her ear, and Mary knows this. This was her plan the whole time, drive Tosh to the point of desperation so that she would have no choice but to help Mary. As I've been saying throughout, Mary has forced Tosh into developing this kind of dependence on her, so when Tosh has no way out, who does she turn to? That's right, Mary. Throughout the course of the episode, Mary has built up this trust, so when she commands Tosh to get her inside of Torchwood, Tosh has no other choice because she's become so disillusioned to everything. She can't trust anyone else and has lost almost all of her agency as a character, her sense of self and identity being stripped away because she doesn't know who or what to believe in anymore.
And I can't be a part of it any longer. I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do.
All throughout the episode, the Torchwood team have been trying to examine the body they found at a building site in the beginning. Initially, it seems like the body is the prostitute shot by a soldier during the cold open of the episode. I think it immediately starts the Torchwood team off on the wrong track and makes them weaker, because they're barking up the wrong tree and don't know enough yet. It makes the team vulnerable because they don't have enough information about the body or the device. They're missing the context, so don't know what's going on until it's almost too late. We eventually find out that the body isn't actually the woman, nor was it killed by a gunshot wound like Owen had initially believed. Even though everyone at the hub is having a good laugh about it because Owen was wrong, it suddenly makes you wonder what happened, since the prostitute at the beginning wasn't shot at all, so what actually happened? It's a good way of teasing the idea that everything from the cold open isn't as it seemed, since we don't have the full picture, just like how Tosh has been coerced into this more limited view of her co-workers, and forgot what she heard was just private thoughts. So things aren't what they seem to Tosh. As it turns out, Mary was actually an escaped prisoner who crashed on Earth and killed her guard, taking the body of the prostitute to hide. It's a great penny drop to show that she has been truly evil this entire time. Now, I know it's not exactly an original twist, but I think it was really well built up. Mary Marring people every few years to sustain her human form and stay on Earth, keeping an eye on her transporter in case she ever needs a quick escape from the planet. The episode culminates in a standoff as Mary holds Tosh hostage, weaponising that distrust she's been feeding Tosh, trying to divide the team more and get Tosh onto her side. It's a very tense climax to the episode, really aided by the pendant's ability. It allows us to hear the thoughts of all the characters in the scene, which is a clever use of the mind-reading powers. It's unique because standoffs like this are never really able to provide this inner perspective of what our characters are thinking. Usually these thoughts and emotions have to be implied through non-verbal acting, but the pendant allows a combination of this non-verbal acting with the panic and fear of the team's thoughts, as they try to make plans without being able to know what the other members are planning. It leads to a good payoff because Jack is able to talk to Tosh in her mind, having worked out she can hear people's thoughts. She had tried earlier on but failed, which added a lot of mystique to Jack since he's already this mysterious enigmatic character, and now his mind can't even be read by this omniscient pendant, but he knows she's trying, which is a good way for him to save her at the end. Jack bluffs Mary into trading Tosh for the transporter, only for it to turn out he'd reprogrammed it to send her into the centre of the sun. Gwen, Owen and Yanto didn't know about the mind powers, even though Owen kind of realises it in this scene. They're all unaware, so can't think of a good way to save Tosh and stop Mary, but Jack is the anchor of the team. His ability to keep his cards close to his chest saves the day. I just think it's a good climax for such a character heavy episode.
Toshiko, don't move. Don't do anything until I say.
Like a number of Torchwood episodes, there is a good focus on the post-action, having an epilogue of sorts to the story to show the personal effects on everyone involved. First of all, Owen confronts Tosh about reading his and Gwen's minds, rightfully being angry at her invading his personal thoughts. It's a very justifiable reaction on his part because it's a complete breach of his privacy. Even though Tosh regrets doing it and knows none of what she heard is her business, it still happened. She still breached his privacy and trust no matter what her intentions were. It's like that old saying about trust being a two-way street. Even if he had negative thoughts about Tosh, she shouldn't have been privy to them. So he is absolutely right to be angry at her because he couldn't read her thoughts in return. However, on the flip side, Gwen is more level-headed in her response. She knows she doesn't have the moral high ground here, since she's cheating on her boyfriend, after all. This is a good character moment for Gwen. In day one, Tosh was more lenient with Gwen and stuck up for her after a mistake. So this is Gwen almost returning the favour and being pretty forgiving here after Tosh's betrayal of trust. Tosh is able to acknowledge just how wrong her invasion was, and that makes her a very sympathetic character because she's still shaken up about having this ability, and she's clearly already struggled to live with it, so it makes sense that she would continue to struggle with the forbidden knowledge she gained by using the power that she shouldn't have had. However, I also find it interesting that Gwen acknowledges this should be her wake-up call to stop the affair, but she knows she won't. It shows that she has a lot of guilt about it because she is betraying Reese's trust, just like how Tosh betrayed everyone's trust, so it creates a good parallel between the two women. They've both betrayed the trust of the people they love, not doing so out of malice or ill intent, just because they had nowhere else to turn to, and they're hurting people as a result of their isolation and secretive lives.
Changing how I see the world. And I can't share them with anyone.
Then there's that great final scene of Tosh and Jack outside, Tosh reflecting on just how powerful this artifact is, and that it's more of a curse than anything else, which kind of mirrors Jack's immortality in a way, because it's such a strong, significant power that seems great on the surface, but really tears someone apart in practice. I think this scene is very reminiscent of Ghost Machine's final scene, Captain Jack being this supportive figure reassuring his teammates that there are some things we just shouldn't know, how we're not designed for these powers so it's okay to be hurt by their effects. This is something that completely changed Tosh's worldview, completely changed not only the perspective of her teammates, but the entire world. You can really understand why she would struggle to live with this reality. It's a good moment for her because it brings everything back to the beginning, where she saw the world with such wonder, seeing everything Torchwood does as an opportunity to learn and discover. But this experience has taught her too much, and had too much influence on her, showing her the more negative side of our world and our species. As Jack says, some things we aren't meant to know. I like that he's supportive and forgiving of Tosh, rather than banishing her or humiliating her for her actions. Even though he's been betrayed by a team member yet again, he knows that none of this was Tosh's fault, she was simply taken advantage of. She didn't murder people like Susie, she just became too influenced by Mary. Jack was right to shout at and threaten Yanto because Yanto unleashed a Cyberman into the hub without any outside influences or innocent intentions. But here Tosh was used and manipulated, not really having any control or agency over her actions. I think it shows that Jack has a lot of restraint. He knows when to punish his team and when to take it easy on them, because he understands their struggles and thought process when these kinds of things happen. He's a great team leader because of this, and I just think it's a very sweet final scene to end the episode on a bittersweet note. Greeks Bearing Gifts is a fantastic character episode for Tosh, who is in urgent need of some exploration. The plot is very low-key without threatening the planet or the universe, it's just a character piece. It's superb character drama that gives us a window into Tosh's life and sense of self. I think it's much more character based than episodes like Cyberwoman and Small Worlds because of these lower stakes. The character exploration never takes a backseat and remains great throughout. Daniela Denbiash is a standout, really putting in a notable performance as Mary. She really feels manipulative and poisonous throughout, her more crass and loose nature serving as a great contrast of Tosh's straight-laced and uptight approach to life. Naoko Mori is the other standout of the episode because she adds such a relatable sense of vulnerability and insecurity to Tosh. When I write stories and when I analyse stories, I always tend to focus on characters, so I've just always loved character-driven stories like Greeks Bearing Gifts. That's why I would give the episode an A on the Torchwood Series 1 tier list. Not only does it have this brilliant character drama, but it also has a great exploration of the concept of being able to read minds. It's a power people always hold up on a pedestal, but as this episode explores, it's really not a great thing to experience. It's one of those Torchwood episodes that uses the mature nature of the show to explore the human effect of alien technology, how it can influence and corrupt people so easily by promising good things at a high personal price. There is certainly some questionable stuff within the episode, but it's genuinely one of my favourites of Series 1, since it just comes together so well for a really enjoyable experience. And I'd like to give an extra special thank you to my gold level patrons, Daniel Shillito, John, Mark Hippold Guy Taylor, and Stephanie Nevin Miller. Thank you a lot for your support.